Hey guys, it's been a while, hasn't it? I'm not going to waste too much time before we get started with the review, but I did want to say I have a couple of bigger projects in the works that I'm pretty excited for, and I hope you guys will enjoy them once I finally get around to actually finishing them. Anyway, on to the actual summary of issue 77. We start with Sonic and the Chaotix checking out White Park, Clutch's old stomping grounds. However, before they can go and check on the kitchen, the one area that Sonic hadn't gotten around to checking yet, they run into Rough and Tumble. The pair are apparently back to their old ways, except this time they're acting all high and mighty for some reason. Their fight is eventually interrupted by Clutch, who claims to now be working for the pair. They interrogate Clutch, who says that he no longer has any resources or will to fight Sonic. He shows Sonic and the Chaotix some paperwork confirming that he's now working for Rough and Tumble. They ask how Clean Sweep is still operating, and Clutch says it's simply because it's being run by robots. Clutch says that they'll all fall into disrepair soon enough. They keep pressing Clutch anyway, and eventually he gives them the location of a Clean Sweep factory so they can go and investigate. They all run off, and Clutch walks into the back of the building. Clutch opens a secret hatch and descends into a bunker, revealing some screens where Dr. Eggman is watching him. He reports what's happened at White Park, and then he takes off his hat, revealing some weird robot attached to his head. It seems to either be controlling Clutch or at the very least threatening him to keep him in line somehow. Clutch is shown to be visibly shaking, which I assumed was him fighting against the mind control. However, I talked to some other people and most people aren't sold on the whole it's mind control idea, so he could have just been nervous because he had a bomb attached to his head or something like that. That's where the issue ends and our analysis begins. Let's start with the good in the issue, because unfortunately this is going to be another pretty critical review. For one, the art is, as always, stellar. I at least personally didn't notice any hiccups, and generally I think the composition of the panels and all of that is perfectly solid and sold the feelings they were supposed to. Outside of the art, the banter here is actually a pretty big highlight of the issue, and honestly a bit better than even the IDW standard. The Chaotix are as hilarious as they should be, and I generally have very few complaints with the moment-to-moment writing. The only thing that slightly rubbed me the wrong way is that Sonic kind of shows up Vector as a detective. Personally, I have always felt like IDW has made Sonic into a bit too much of a Mary Sue. I don't mean that literally, I just wish he was a bit more flawed, and I like when Sonic has to rely on his friends to shore up some of his weaknesses. Relying on Vector and the Chaotix to do detective work shows how Sonic's philosophy on friendship makes him more powerful after all, so it's also thematic. Having Sonic do all the detective work in this issue is economic in terms of page count, I suppose, but it kind of undercuts a lot of the character and thematic work that the comic has done. To make up for that, though, the other characters are all in peak form. Charmy, in particular, is great in this issue. He's such a little shit the entire time. He really feels like a little kid in this issue, which is not how he comes off a lot of the time because it's hard to write a little kid well. However, this time around, his banter with Vector feels just perfect and was honestly pretty hilarious. I think this is one of Charmy's best showings in IDW so far. That's all of the notable good things in this issue. The actual moment-to-moment things that happen in it are fun and all work, but the overall thrust of the issue just felt disappointing. For one thing, it feels like not a lot actually happened in this issue, which isn't actually true, but I did get that feeling when I was reading it. If you go over the issue bit by bit, we do get a full story here. We investigate the Chateau, find Rough and Tumble, have a fight with them, then we find Clutch and have a full conversation with him before the final twist of the issue. There are more than enough twists and turns to this plot, and it's not like you could really do this plotline any faster or put more important information into this many pages. However, it feels underwhelming because the entire thing is so predictable. I didn't see the exact twist with Clutch coming, but as soon as he said he was working for Rough and Tumble, I knew he was full of it. I instantly knew everything he was saying was bullshit and that we would soon see past his facade and figure out what was actually going on here. This kind of made all the honestly well done foreshadowing in the issue feel kind of tiresome to get through. The hints that Rough and Tumble aren't actually running a business, so Clutch couldn't be meaningfully working for them, felt less like a peek behind the curtain and more like a foghorn being blown into my face telling me what I already knew. I understand why it's like this. I think with this plot outline, there's not really a better way you could have gone about telling the story. We have to spend this long investigating White Park, and in fact, I already took some shortcuts with Sonic investigating the entire place in one panel. After that, we have to have the fight with Rough and Tumble to set up Clutch's cover, and we need these pages of dialogue to make Sonic and the Chaotix letting Clutch go feel at all believable. It just kind of feels like you're going through the motions more than anything, and that alone is enough to make this feel like kind of a substandard issue to where I think IDW Sonic should be. Maybe this could have been helped by showing us things from Clutch's perspective. Instead of having Sonic and the Chaotix doing some detective work, we could have just had Eggman attaching the robot to Clutch and watch Clutch try and deal with this situation. It would have given us basically all of the information this issue does across in a single scene, though it would require a lot of rewriting and would mean that Sonic wouldn't have much to do in this arc, so that may have just not been an option. Getting away from the particulars and more to the direction this pushes the comic overall, I have some concerns about this development. For one, it feels like our rogues gallery is rapidly diminishing. With Clutch under Eggman's control and Mimic likely being put away for good in issue 79 if the promos are anything to go by, that means that the only antagonists the comic has left are Eggman and the duo of Surge and Kid, and that worries me. People already said that IDW needed more villains, and while I didn't agree with that statement, that was back when Clutch and Mimic still looked like they were going to be on the table for the foreseeable future. With only 2 real antagonists, I think the comic will have a bit of a difficult time setting up interesting conflicts in the future. Now, this concern may be a bit overblown on my part. Eggman is probably setting up for something big sooner rather than later, and who knows where that will land all the current villains afterward. They could also have some brand new antagonists in the works that we're going to be seeing soon that completely solve this problem, and just want to put the current villains to bed before trotting them out, and that'd be totally fine. I'm just a little bit nervous that we're going to be losing 2 perfectly good villains a bit too soon without anyone to really replace them. The other problem with this direction for the comic is that I feel like we really need to get something more from Clutch soon. Clutch has been a contentious figure in the circles I run in, mainly because he hasn't been able to actually accomplish much of anything. Clutch is supposed to be an intimidating villain, but he hasn't been able to really get one over on just about anyone at this point in the story. On top of that, he's just not a very compelling villain in his own right. The twist where he's working for Eggman is kind of a nothing burger because why should I care that Eggman has this guy under his control? I don't really care about Clutch's well-being, and it's not like Eggman having Clutch under his thumb is going to make him all that much more imposing. Sure, Eggman controlling a mafia boss sounds scary, but Clutch just hasn't actually done anything threatening yet. Something a friend of mine said that really stuck with me is that Clutch as a character is kind of predicated on the existence of a shady underside of society that we've yet to see. Clutch's business implies the existence of people interested in buying Eggman weaponry and likely some more shady stuff as well, but the only person we know who's done under-the-counter business with him is Dr. Starline, and he's dead. We have seen no buyers and no meaningful hired muscle outside of Rough and Tumble, and they're both idiots. The criminal element in IDW Sonic just isn't very threatening, and I wish it was because it would make Clutch way scarier through implication alone. With Clutch not being set up as a proper window into the underside of society, not being that threatening through his own action, and not really having that much in terms of his own motivations or history as a character, he feels, now that he's under Eggman's thumb, like there's not a lot for him to do if we don't see something big from him soon. Putting him in this kind of position could be used for some serious character development, or at least something like a backstory reveal that paints the events of the comic in a new light. I don't feel like we can be asked to keep caring about this character if they don't do something more with him in the near future, and it looks like they might be planning to do that. I just hope it sticks to landing. The last concern of mine is that this issue feels like it may be prepping the comic to go into a bit of a slow period for a while, and I really hope that that's not the case. I know downtime needs to exist in these comics. You can't only have giant plot relevant issue after plot relevant issue, but at the same time, the comic just got out of a long period of downtime in between Eggperial City and Phantom Rider, and while I did like Phantom Rider a lot, I know other people didn't. To be clear, I'm only talking about some people. I don't know what the overall consensus on that arc is, but I've heard a lot of people in my circle saying that they didn't enjoy it that much. At least issues 78 and 79 seem like they're going to be a bit more impactful based on their preview, so I hope this issue is just a bit of an outlier and the rest of this arc will keep up the pace a little bit while we set up the next story arcs. Now, that's about all I have to say about issue 77 in particular. I know this is a pretty short video by my standards, but this is kind of a nothing issue overall. It's all set up and no real payoff, and what it's setting up isn't anything we have insight into at the moment. Me trying to say anything else about it would just be speculation at this point. One last thing before I go, I do need to bring up the DC Sonic crossover that just got released. As of right now, we only have one issue of it so far, so I'm not going to be covering it here, but so far it's really good, and I look forward to covering it on the channel once we get the entire thing out. With all that said, it's YouTuber call to action time. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and consider becoming a channel member if you really love my content for some reason. Anyway, thank you all for watching. See you next time.